The Joe Rogan Experience.
Now, this thing that you did when you walked across Antarctica, very impressive, incredible. But I'm sure you've seen the National Geographic article they wrote about you. And they said that there was another man from, was it Norway, that had done it already. That it wasn't the first time someone had gone across Antarctica.
Yeah.
And he had gone actually a further distance.
Yeah. So something I've been talking about super openly, including in my book, which is the Nat Geo article. You know, it's a little bit unfortunate. I actually just published a 16-page letter asking Nat Geo to retract the entire article. And the reason it's 16 pages is, unfortunately, the entire article they wrote is just so riddled with inaccuracies and kind of misrepresentations and omissions that, you know, we had to kind of ask them, say, hey, look, you know, you kind of got this wrong. I was never properly interviewed for it. But one of the things, you're talking about this guy, Borge Ausland, this Norwegian guy, absolute freaking legend. So what this guy did in 1996, so, you know, 20 some years before that I attempted my crossing, is he crossed Antarctica from the edge of the coastline, across the ice shelf, all the way across the landmass, across the other ice shelf, roughly 1,800 miles. And what he used to propel himself was he used a kite for a good portion of the time. And it's an absolute extraordinary project. And what's really weird about sort of this National Geographic article, a number of senses, is one of the premises of it was saying, you know, Colin never talked about Borge Ausland. Like, he never talked about him in his book. He never mentioned it. He never this. And in my book, what's really bizarre and why we're asking for a retraction, because it's just really ineffectual, is that, you know, here I am on page 49 of my book. Literally, it says, the Norwegian adventurer Borge Ausland in many ways defined the terrain of astonishing modern Antarctic feats, becoming the first person to cross Antarctica solo when he traveled 1,800 miles in 63 days from 1996 to 1997. Not only did he cross the entire landmass of Antarctica, but he also crossed the full Ron and Ross ice shelves from the ocean's edge. Ausland's expedition has deeply inspired me and was unsupported, and he hauled all of his food and fuels with no resupplies. So it was weird. It's like the journalist wrote this article but didn't read my book.
That's not surprising.
And I had done, I don't know, there's a lot of speculation. I had did this big project, and the film project around the row was with Discovery. I don't know if Nat Geo is coming at Discovery or whatever, but it's really bizarre. I mean, we could talk about all the different kind of fine points of that, but the big distinction, and I'll say it, I've said it, shout it from the rooftops, but I'll say it here again. Borge Ausland is absolutely incredible. Like, I am in awe of the guy. What he did in 96 is phenomenal. That's why I write about it in my book. That's why I've written about it on my social. The day after I finished my crossing, I wrote about it on there as well. And I said, wow, so many people have inspired me. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. The only way I was able to do this.
Right, but this says impossible first, right? So he did it first.
Right. So the difference is there's kind of two really specific distinctions in the world of polar travel. There's unsupported, which means not getting resupplied with food or fuel, like I was talking about with the food. And then there's unassisted, which means not using anything to propel you other than your own body. So that's called human powered alone. So what he did is considered assisted, in that he used a kite. But he was able to go twice the distance of me, which is amazing. So he crossed.
How often did he use the kite? Because what I'd read that he had only used the kite in a few instances where the wind was right.
Right. So that's another one of the things that the National Geographic article unfortunately got wrong. And in my 16-page letter that anyone can read, it's on my website, colinobrady.com/blog, letter to Nat Geo, or it's linked to my Instagram. It's not like a he said thing where I'm like, oh, hey, this got wrong. It's just actually a really kind of documented and sourced document that has links to everything. And one of the links it shows is actually his entire kind of project afterwards in the aftermath of him talking about it, including talking about with Parawing, which was one of his sponsors, the guys who actually built and manufactured the kite. And they're talking about how he used it for about at least a third of his journey, 600 or so miles, as well as, you know, he was able to use the kite going 125 miles in a single day, which is, like I said, it's amazing. It's really incredible what he did in the time that he did it. It's just really kind of an apples and oranges comparison when it comes to polar travel and the distinctions of that.
So he traveled further, but but he used some assistance.
Yeah, so there's basically these different distinctions in the world of polar travel, and that's another one of the things. Again, I'm not sure how they got this wrong. And in the link on the 16-page thing, I show the text message when the journalist asked me, well, tell me about these definitions of unsupported and unassisted, and I sent him the link, and there's these links. It's kind of published thing on this website called Antarctica Logistics and Expeditions, the main sort of expedition facilitator, the person who like runs logistics down there. And it's very clear. Unsupported means no use of resupplies. Right. Unassisted means no use of kites or dogs. And so the thing that I did solo that people, I guess, have gotten somewhat confused about, or at first, was I was the first person to cross the landmass of Antarctica solo, unsupported, no resupplies, and unassisted, no kites. What Borge Ausland did is he was the first person to cross Antarctica, not just the landmass, but also the ice shelves. So there's frozen ocean on these ice shelves. So from the coast, across the ice shelf, across the landmass, and across the other ice shelf. And no one yet, including myself, has ever done a solo, unsupported, unassisted crossing of both the landmass and the ice shelves. I hope someone does it, man. It would be amazing. I had 375-pound sled, and I almost ran out of food at the end crossing the landmass. If you'd need maybe a 600-pound sled or something like that, or maybe a more optimized food solution that no one's thought of yet, but hasn't been done yet.
How big was Ausland's sled?
Similar size to me. So he was out there for, I think he was out there for 63 days, roughly. I was out there for 54 days. So we were not out there a lot difference in duration of time.
Oh, okay. So the sled really did make a big difference then if he's going that much further than you.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah.
So one more time, you were out there how many days?
I was out there 54 days.
And he was out there
63 days.
Okay, that's not that different.
Right. And so he, like I said, on some of the days he talks about it openly, that he does it in kilometers, but if you calculate back to miles, like 125 miles in a 15-hour period of time. That's unfathomable just walking, pulling a sled. They're just two different things. It's like the difference between sailing across an ocean and rowing a boat across the ocean.
Why do you think National Geographic got that wrong then? Because the way they wrote it, it was, they made it look like you're just a fame whore, and that, there was a bunch of other explorers and outdoors people that were in support of the fact that Ausland was the only one, the first one to do it. They didn't make this distinction, and they actually made it seem like as if the sled was an ingenious solution. But it seems like that was a planned thing, and that was an engineered thing, and that it wasn't something that he built up on the fly. This was the method that they used to help him get across the snow.
Totally. And like I said, if you look in the pet letter that I wrote, it's got links to the manufacturer. They kind of talk about it as being this elegant solution. It's like you put a kite up randomly.
You figured it out. Hey, I got an idea.
Yeah, but it's like a fully manufactured thing. It's a legit kite. And like I said, this is not me knocking on that. I actually think that project, it's one of the projects that inspired me the most to do what I did. It is amazing.
It sounds amazing. Can we see what Ausland, is there any photograph of Ausland's kite? I want to see what it looks like. It's whenever someone does something extraordinary, like there's no doubt just what you did. How many days again?
54 days alone.
It's fucking crazy. It's crazy. And for anybody to shit on that is nuts. So, and you're the first one that's ever done it just pulling that thing. And you showed us what it was like last time you were here.
Totally.
And some of the areas where you had to pull it. It seems like an insane physical undertaking.
Totally. I mean, so yeah, it definitely tested me to the edges of my potential. There was many times that it felt impossible. I think we talked about it last time, but the second chapter of my book is called Frozen Tears, because on the first hour trying to pull my sled, 375 pounds, fully loaded of food and fuel, I started crying. Like, I literally started crying. The tears are freezing in my face. It's an all-time pathetic feeling. I mean, it was really, really brutal and really challenging. And one of the things for sure in the National Geographic article, they're not disputing that I did this. It's not like they're saying you didn't walk 932 miles by yourself across Antarctica.
They kind of like grudgingly gave you credit for doing something really freaky.
Yeah.
They also didn't mention the difference between the time it took you to travel that and the time it took Ausland to travel a far greater distance, or that he used that kite to go more than 100 miles in a day. Yeah. Those are pretty big, important things.
Totally. And I think that, hopefully you can pull up a picture of the Ausland kite with the kite.
Anything, Jamie?
It's linked in there.
Not finding his specifically. I'm finding kites there, but not with him.
Yeah,
if it's out there, Jamie will find it.
Yeah, we'll find it in a second. But, it's, like I said, it's an unfortunate thing. I wrote this letter. The editor of National Geographic actually responded and said they're reviewing it. I think they're going to hopefully do the right thing. The facts are pretty clear on this one.
Well, hopefully we can pressure them by just explaining it here. Here it is. Here's this Okay. Yeah, that's a big difference. That's a big ass fucking kite.
Yeah.
I'm sure that has a lot of power behind it too. And I bet that really helped him.
Totally. And
Because you can ski with those things. Like the fact that he's got skis on and he's getting pulled by that kite. I mean, you're gliding.
Yeah.
You're not propelling yourself.
They're both really cool things.
Hold on,
They're
go
just
back
different.
to that, Jamie. Go back to that. Look, he doesn't have poles in his hands.
No, he's just holding on to the kite being pulled along by it. Yeah.
So he's probably strapped to that kite.
Yeah, it's like if you imagine
not
like a
just-
kiteboard, like a
Yeah.
kiteboarding on the water or something
So he's
like
probably
that.
strapped at the waist. He's holding on to that kite, but it's pulling him while he's on skis.
Yes.
Whereas what you did was pull with trekking poles.
Yeah, I
right?
had trekking poles
Yeah.
and cross-country skis with skins, but just to give me
Yes.
traction so I didn't sink too deep in the snow. But I'm just walking, basically, just
Right.
pulling it with my own body fully.
He's not doing that. It's a different thing. And
They're
I'm
just
sure,
two different things.
I'm sure there was times where he had to walk, right?
Yeah, he man-hauled for parts of it as well, like a significant distance, but a lot of it, when the wind was with him, he put up his kite and pulled along. And
The fact that he was able to go more than 100 miles in a day makes me go, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
Come on, that's a different thing.
Totally different thing.
That's
And
a different thing. National Geographic did not recognize that's a different thing. That he can go on the snow pulling 300 pounds more than 100 miles. How many?
He went 125 in one time in
That's
15 hours.
Fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's a totally different thing.
Completely.
National Geographic, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
I mean, they should have been really clear about that, because they were trying to make it out like some elegant solution that he occasionally used, not big deal. But what he really did was amazing. What he did was fucking amazing. There's no doubt about it.
No
But
doubt.
That what we just saw in that image of him getting pulled by that giant ass fucking kite on skis, strapped to this harness with all the weight behind him, also being pulled by that giant ass kite. That's a different thing. 124 miles in a day, pulling 300 plus pounds. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
It's hard to walk 124 miles in a day.
Let alone
You
with
know?
nothing on your back.
I mean, Zach Bitter, who holds the American world record for the fastest 24 hours ever run, ran it full clip in 11 hours. He ran 100 miles.
Wow.
So 124 miles in 15 minutes while dragging
15 hours, yeah.
hundreds of pounds, or 15 minutes, I say 15 minutes, 15 hours, 124 miles while dragging hundreds of pounds of gear, all in 15 hours is insane.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yes.
If Zach Bitter can run 100 miles in 11 hours and break a world record, or is it a world record or American record? American record. Yeah, that's a crazy record.
Yeah.
100 fucking miles in 11 hours is
That's
crazy running. And that guy did 124 with hundreds of pounds of gear and a sled in 15 hours.
Exactly.
That's a different thing.
Just two different things,
It's
man.
two different things.
And so,
World record, correction.
Zach's world record. Yeah, Zach won the
World record.
He had the American record first, and then he broke the world record in his latest attempt. Zach Bitter's a monster.
yeah.
Shout out to Zach. But him being able to do that running is incredible. That guy being able to go further in just 4 hours longer, pulling hundreds of pounds of gear. Come on, National Geographic.
They're just two different things.
That's a different, and it's not unimpressive. It's incredibly impressive. I mean, that guy has fucking steel resolve to be able to do that and get all the way across the ice shelves and all that shit that he had to do.
Absolutely. And I mean, the biggest thing for me is, unfortunately, that was, portrayed in a certain way. I don't know if it wasn't fact checked or what that, but like for me, the whole purpose of any of this, the whole purpose of writing the book and sharing it with the world and being on, talking to people, via your podcast or whatever, like my whole goal is to inspire other people to step outside of their comfort zones, do things in their life, challenge themselves. Like this is not about me. It's not about notches in the belt.
Well, it's got to
like,
be a little bit about you. You wrote a book.
I like it. Have you written a book?
No, I have not.
Really?
No.
That surprises me.
I started writing a book at one point in time, but I had a deal with a book publisher, and the notes were so brutal. I gave them the money back.
Really?
Yeah, I was
They
I
were
don't
like,
wanna
they
do
didn't
this.
like it?
They wanted me to write essentially the way I write stand-up. They wanted me to be like, set up punchline. I was like, this is not how you write things, guys. Like they wanted it
different without the intonation of the voice and the...
Yeah, they actually wanted to take my stand-up. They offered to just take my stand-up and transcribe it into a book. And I said I'd never do that. And they're like, well, George Carlin did it. I go, it's because he owed the fucking IRS $1 billion. Come on, man. George, if you asked George, it was a good idea. I bet he would say no.
Yeah.
You know, he needed money. George Carlin was like deep in the hole with the IRS. He did a lot of things I'm sure he didn't want to do.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's a good idea to write a book that way.
Well, I'll tell you, I have walked across the landmass of Antarctica by myself. I've rowed a boat. I've done some other crazy shit in my life. But the hardest thing I've ever done is write a book.
Really?
Yes,
No
man.
shit. Is that hard?
It really was, you know. I'm proud of the outcome. You know, I really poured my heart and soul into it, but it was challenging. I've been journaling since I was a little kid, like since I was 12 years old. So going back through all my journals and thinking about, you know, there's the Antarctica piece of this, but it's the subtitle is From Fire to Ice. So I talk about, you know, being burned in this fire in Thailand, being told I would never walk again normally, going through all these pieces of my life. But one of the things that happened when I was in Antarctica, which it was interesting to me, maybe you'll find it interesting, is as I was out there by myself in this empty white landscape, 24 hours of daylight, endless white nothingness, my mind started filling in with all of these memories. So I deleted almost all my music. I'm in silence. I'm a full solitude. And like if I said to you, hey, Joe, remember the day you graduated from high school? And like something's going to pop in your mind right now. We're going to keep talking and you're going to move on from that. But when I was walking out there by myself, if someone would pop in my head like, hey, Colin, remember your first swim race when you were a little kid? And all of a sudden, like I'd be back there. Like I could like dive in and I could see my mom on the edge of the pool deck and the, you know, the wind's blowing across my face and I can see the kid next to me and I can taste the chlorine in my mouth. I mean, visceral memories, like a lucid dream, were coming back to me throughout for weeks and weeks and weeks at a time. So the book itself, it reads about Antarctica, but it intersperses the way my experience was in Antarctica, which was actually going back in through my life in this kind of tapestry of sort of visceral memories and flashbacks of other expeditions and childhood and the ups and downs in my personal life and kind of all of these things kind of conspiring into one. But it was wild to go deep into the brain like that.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
We should probably point out, we've had a podcast before, and this podcast that we did before was right after you got back from this journey in Antarctica, and you described the whole thing in Thailand. You described getting burned and how you never thought you were going to walk again and all that stuff. So we should tell people. So stop, pause,
go back the other one,
and then come back here again. Did it upset you when the National Geographic article came out? Like, did you feel like, well, they just got it wrong? Let me straighten them out. You know,
it's one of those things. I'd be curious to hear your perspective on kind of media and stuff like this. You've been around, you know, doing type of stuff like me more longer than me, but it hurt my feelings, obviously, and I was kind of it was bizarre because it was so factually inaccurate, and National Geographic is a magazine or an outlet that I've looked up to throughout my entire life. It's just like a really beautiful, platform, and so I was just surprised. I was surprised that I was never asked for a proper long-form interview of this. I was surprised that I was never contacted by a proper fact checker. There was just some things that were just like weird and out of place, and, I guess it was a freelancer. I don't know the whole story behind it.
That's probably what it is.
But
if I had to guess, look, there's very little in like praising people. There's a whole lot in taking people down. Yeah. If they could find that you did something, that you did something incorrect, or you lied about something or exaggerated about something, I mean, they made you out to be a liar. Yeah. I mean, I read it and I was like, wow, like they're saying he's a liar. Yeah. They're saying how much of it is fiction. They literally said fiction. But how much of it could be fiction if you fucking really did walk 54 goddamn days across Antarctica.
Not only that, the kind of weird parts about it is not only that, but I also had a GPS on me the entire time. It was completely transparent. Every 10 minutes, the entire journey were live for to see. The New York Times covered it. They had my GPS tracker up live. The map of my route is in the first page of my book, let alone online 24/7. There's been hundreds of articles written about this by outlets who have fact-checked and researched or whatever. So for Nat Geo to make all those claims, it's like saying like Colin somehow tricked every person ever from every news outlet that's covered this and fact-checked it and reported on it, and his editors of the book, and some hacked his GP. I mean, it's like a crazy conspiracy, weird, like, kind of stance on it.
Do you think it's because everyone, how do you say his name? Ausland?
Ausland, yeah.
That Ausland had done it. Everybody knew that Ausland had done it. Maybe they just didn't understand the details of it, so they started complaining, hey, he didn't do it first. Ausland did it first, and this guy's like, I got a story. So he goes to try to go after you, but then realizes, like, he kind of did it first, but the other guy did it. Well, let's just say that the kite was cool. Right. He had a cool kite.
But, I mean, he did even weirder things. Like in the first paragraph or second paragraph of the entire article, he takes a quote from page 50 of my book and a quote from page 214 of my book.
And puts them
together? And parses them together as if they're a single statement. And I'm like, they're about two completely different things that I'm talking about. And you're like, dude.
That's what people do, man.
You know,
they want to sell dirt.
You know, or he says like, Colin made up this thing about no rescue zones. No one's ever written about the fact of in Antarctica. And he talks about me getting picked up in Antarctica like I can call an Uber. He literally says in there, uses somebody else's quote, he says, I mean, getting picked up in Antarctica is like calling an Uber, which is by itself
He
just
really said
literally
that?
says that in the article, which is just crazy.
That's
And then-
hilarious. Bitch, try getting an Uber in the woods in Montana. Okay?
I'm like
You know?
an Uber, and then the craziest thing, and again,
That is so crazy.
my
that someone
response to
says
this
that.
is just factual. It's not, you know, it's I just try to not be too defensive or anything about it, but it's just
Well, the good news is this will reach way more people than that article.
yeah, it's but I would say one last thing about it. The irony of this is if you Google Borga Auslan in 2019, right after I finished my crossing, he's interviewed about all of this, and in a quote, and I linked to this in my my letter, him saying, there are parts of Antarctica, particularly in the large sastrugi zones, which is exactly what I was talking about, where rescue is impossible. Like the guy who uses against me is also quoted saying the other thing, but then he says, it's like the whole thing is just, it's crazy, man.
There's so much money in shitting on someone. That's what it is, I'm sure. And
Trying
I'm
to keep
sure
my
this
head up.
guy, well, I'm sure this guy who wrote that article is probably a little bit of a hater.
Yeah.
Probably saw you and like, the fuck this guy.
It's the world we live in, unfortunately. I try to, keep my head up. Like I said, I wrote this book to inspire other people to step outside their comfort zones,
I'm sure
do
they
amazing
paid
things.
you for it too, right?
I got paid for it as well. Yeah, I got.
It's also like,
is that so wrong?
No, you definitely should get paid. You should get paid for the whole thing.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're trying to diminish what you did, and what you really did do was walk by yourself for 54 days through Antarctica. And then one of the things he was even saying something about it was on a road.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, bitch, why don't you walk dragging 300 pounds on a road? Like, does that matter? Everything's covered in snow and ice. Like,
Exactly.
What fucking road is this?
Yeah, so there's basically this 300-mile stretch, which is the last third of my part of my journey, which, by the way, was on my GPS, which, by the way, I talk about in my book, which, by the way, I widely acknowledge, and it's called the South Pole Overland Traverse. And so the South Pole Station, the U.S. research station that's at the South Pole, is resupplied throughout the summer season from the coast, and they drive this kind of bunch of tractors basically up this area called the Leverett Glacier. And it's not like a paved road. This is them driving over ice and snow and like filling in crevasses along the way, etc. And there's some tire tracks and some flagging that are out there. So first of all, I've already traveled almost 600 miles without any of that. And then as I get there, and we know this is part of it, and I've talked about widely with all the polar experts, all of the people that make the classifications, and unassisted refers specifically to kites and dogs. And they're trying to make this claim that the road somehow, quote unquote, big air quotes, road, basically some rutted up tracks in the snow. I'm
No,
out there.
this is not a paved road.
No, there's not a paved road out there. And the thing is, Antarctica is so brutal. We showed some clips last time, me setting up my tent in 50, 60 mile per hour winds that it was like.
Yeah.
When that blows over, imagine driving a tractor over snow and then 50, 60 mile per hour winds come in. What do you think happens? It's blown over immediately. So I never saw these tractors, I never saw these vehicles, I never saw this. I saw some flags, of course. I saw some rutted tracks, but I linked to it on my letter
So
to
it's
this.
really not much difference than walking on flat ground.
No, not at all. And still, there's still this sastrugi there, so there's still huge bumps of snow. And a lot of the time, it was whited. I was completely whited out. I couldn't see 5 or 10 feet in front of me. So it's not like I could. A lot of times, these flags that were every 100, 400 meters. It's not like I'd even see those. So it's just a shame. And I've been very transparent about the fact that I used that route. It was the safest route. It was the only route the logistic company wanted to support, and it falls completely in the distinctions of what is known as unassisted. And he kind of makes this claim about that's not true, where people are rethinking that. And one of the weird things is
Rethinking it.
right. So they're now, because of some of this, the polar community have gotten together after my project. So my project squarely falls in the definitions as they were, followed all of the rules and all of this. Now they're sitting together and they're saying, maybe we should rewrite some of these rules or make certain definitions different, which, by the way, if they want to change rules, that's totally fine. The problem is, it would be like this. This is like, with them calling me sort of like a liar or something, would be equivalent of this. If Major League Baseball got together and said, you know what, all games in baseball are going to be 10 innings now instead of 9 innings. And all of those guys over the last 100 years that played 200,000 games or whatever, who played 9 innings, they cheated, they lied, they didn't play the full game. Like they cheated. Just like,
I see what you're saying.
they're if they want to change whatever distinctions or classifications or stuff forward looking, great.
And what would the distinctions be that they would change? That you can't do it on a road?
So I think they're trying to make it finer grained, which is like there would be like a kite distinction. There would be a no supported distinction. There would be a distinction for using, partial of if there was a flagging or this like, road, which by the way is not a road, to be clear. It's snow and ice just like the rest of it. I don't. There's there might if you
but
you
none
Google,
of it, at no point in time was it like flat ground.
No, it's ice and snow. Where a tractor, we might see like some wheels. And in fact, Lou Rudd, who's the other guy who I was racing out there in Antarctica, he wrote a whole blog post about that's linked to in my letter. And of course, he did the exact same thing as me. By the way, the exact same thing, same distinction. I finished a couple days ahead of him. But what he did was absolutely incredible. Is this race, and we talk a lot about it in the book. And a ton of respect for that guy as well. He's a friend of mine, and he writes about this quote unquote road, or the South Pole Overland Traverse as it's actually known, and he's like, it's rutted up tracks. Like you couldn't, even in the parts where I saw tire tracks, it's like actually worse than
because you don't slide across
you don't slide across it. Right. The snow is all rutted up. It's chunked up. It's actually like tripping you. It's like even worse.
Like and skiing on broken ice versus powder.
Yeah. So this journalist and there's other people who are saying this is not like they've like been out there before.
The thing is, it's an attractive thing to say. Part of his journey was actually on a road. You're like, oh, fuck that
There's
guy.
a road in Antarctica?
Yeah, but that's how it sounds. It's when you say part of it was on a road, it sounds like this is the road. Oh, Christ. That's it? That's the road. That ain't not really a fucking road, man. That's just flat snow.
Exactly. And that would be like the best case. Most of the time it's wind blowing across it. Like that's on the perfect conditions, perfect sunny day.
But look to the left and look to the right.
Exactly.
Like it doesn't make a difference.
It's the same.
It's the same.
Yeah.
That's really deceptive that they wrote that.
Yeah.
That's really deceptive because they made it seem like, and then he gets to the highway and he's just walking.
It's like hitchhiking, put my thumb out, pick up a
come
bus.
On, man. He still went 54 fucking days across Antarctica. And I know they acknowledged that in a small way in the article, but they really, just the description, calling that a road. Like that is, sort of technically a road. There's no fucking ground, man. It's just all ice and snow.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't see the ground.
Exactly. And like I said, I was transparent about it. That was my route. Asked all the people. They're like, yep, you're within the rules. You're doing the right thing. No one's ever done this before. And then,
Damn, everybody's a fucking hater.
Yeah. That's the world we live in, unfortunately.
Bucket. You know that expression?
No, tell me that.
Throw crabs in a bucket. None of them ever get out because when they try to get out, the other ones grab them and drag them down.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
They're piling on top of each other, the other crabs. Just get out here with me. Fuck, I can't walk 54 days. You can't either, bitch. Just drag you.
Onward.
Onward is nice, but man, it's really disturbing.